My name is Debbie Nicole. I'm a Kent County Master Gardener. I'm also the person who's in charge of scheduling these workshops. And I also love to present. So I wanted to just give you a little intro background here. This workshop is designed for beginners, beginner level hydroponic gardening. You can get as in-depth and complicated as you want, but we're going to try to keep it fairly simple for our beginners here today. And I have promised you to talk about tips for beginners, so I want to let you know up front. There are some common mistakes that beginners make when they start hydroponic gardening. One of them is a lack of adequate airflow. Your plants need oxygen, they need air. If you don't have enough air circulation, your plants won't do well. You can get a fungus, you can get really spindly plants if you don't have adequate airflow. Another problem is poor temperature control. Most plants will tolerate a little bit cooler temperatures, but if they get too hot, they have problems, which is a big problem with outdoor hydroponic gardening, especially with greens. Greens like it to be a little cooler. So this is perfect for growing indoors in the winter. If you keep your home a little bit under 70, around 70 or under 70 degrees, it's perfect temperature for them. Another problem you have is poor humidity control. So if your home is too dry or too humid, there are some things you can do about that. I haven't had a problem with that personally. And another big problem, especially in the winter, is insufficient light. So we'll talk a lot more about lighting, but you really need to, in the wintertime, provide some supplemental lighting, and we'll give you the details on that. Some plants can need up to 20 hours a day of light indoors because artificial light is not as strong as natural sunlight, so they actually need more hours of light. So I want to tell you that I started my first hydroponic garden 30 years ago. So I've been doing this for a while. My daughter had a school science project where she had to pick a topic, and for some reason she picked growing hydroponic tomatoes. So when she was done with her science fair, I kind of took over the tomato growing at that point, and I got really interested in doing that at that time. And I have gone back to it, and it's now been probably about 3 years that I've been growing lettuce indoors. So what exactly is hydroponics? Well, basically all it is gardening without soil. So the really cool thing about this is all those things you learn about making your soil good and, composting and all those things don't really apply when you come to hydroponics. So this is not anything new, although there's been a lot of talk about it recently. This is actually something that was practiced thousands of years ago. Some of the earliest examples of hydroponic gardening were the hanging gardens of Babylon and the floating gardens of China. So these were things that were going on thousands of years ago. And back in the 1950s is when scientists actually got interested in improving and doing research on the best practices for hydroponic gardening. The other thing is I recently was made aware that a lot of urban areas, if you live in a big city, you could be in what they call a food desert. There are places that I didn't realize, so I got accused of being privileged, which maybe I am, because I've never lived in a city, and there are areas in cities where they don't have any access to fresh food. They live off canned food or what they can get because there's no fresh food available that they have access to or they're able to get to. So another push has been, as you see in this picture here, to take a whole building and set up on multiple levels all kinds of hydroponic gardens in these trays and these layers, so they can use the space efficiently and provide fresh food to people who live in urban areas, so they can have the nutrition and vitamins and all the good things that come from having fresh rather than canned foods. And also a lot of research has been done, if you ever watched The Martian or any movies like that, you know that this has been being researched for gardening, future gardening in space where they don't have soil, and they're only gardening with water. So there are a lot of benefits that you might not think about with hydroponic gardening. So they do use less space. You can garden vertically. Also, the plants, you can garden more efficiently, so the plants can be placed closer together, and you can grow more food in a smaller area. They use 90% less water, and you might be thinking, how is that? But basically, the water is just recirculated and used over and over again. You don't have as many problems with evaporation, or you don't have runoff for most systems or anything else. So you're actually using less water. So in areas in the desert or places where you have a drought, you can garden more efficiently because you don't have to rely on all that rain and different water. The plants grow faster. Their roots don't have to search for the nutrients through the soil because they're just delivered right there to the roots. They can grow 30 to 50% faster because they're also given extra oxygen, and the roots need oxygen. If you've ever learned about trees, you know that your tree roots are smothered if you put big piles of mulch on them because they need that oxygen to the roots. So you get extra oxygen. It stimulates the root growth, and it also helps the nutrients absorb faster. So you get crops that you can harvest earlier than when you garden outdoors. You have better temperature control indoors, so you don't have to worry about excessive heat, excessive cold, frost, weather issues. Let's see. You can, of course, garden all year round indoors, so you don't have to only garden during the warmer seasons, or worry about the season that you need to grow cooler vegetables and not grow lettuce in the summer. You can do that indoors all year round. And if you look at this graphic here, you will notice another thing. You don't have a problem with weeds. No weeds will grow. You don't have much problem with pests. Some pests are possible, but it's not a major concern. You don't have to use any pesticides because you have no pests. You don't have to use any herbicides because you don't have any weeds. You don't have to worry about your neighbor ruining your organic garden by spraying chemicals all over his lawn and they blow into your garden. You don't have to worry about, since you have no soil, you don't have to worry about soil-borne pests living in the soil. It's a lot cleaner when you get your produce indoors. When we harvest our lettuce, I have a salad spinner and I was washing it, and my husband's like, "Why are you doing that? It's just been in the house. It's not dirty." I'm like, "You're kind of right." So you of course you can wash it, but you'll notice that your produce, of course, stays a lot cleaner. The lack of weeds makes it a lot easier to maintain. So those are just some really good benefits for hydroponic gardening. Okay, quickly, I'm going to give you an overview of some of the different styles or types of hydroponic garden systems. There are more than what I'm going to talk about here, so I had to pick out some that I want to emphasize, some of the more common ones. There's one I didn't include, which is just growing in a bottle. So you can actually grow a plant hydroponically just in a glass or plastic bottle that you paint the outside, because you don't want algae growing in there from the sunlight. So you would paint the outside with like a dark paint or like chalkboard paint, and put a plug in there, and you can grow a plant in that plug with its roots in the water without soil. So that's really the simplest one. I didn't include that here since you can only grow one plant per bottle, but I'm going to give you some resources where if you want to do it that way, you can do it, but it's pretty simple. So the first one I want to talk about here is called deep water culture. This is what's really common in kits, which we're going to talk about kits later. This is a more of a passive garden type thing because you're not circulating water, so they call them passive. You do need air. So this is also a great way for beginners to garden. So I'm getting ready to grow strawberries using this process. I had planned to start them already, but my strawberry plants got delivered when I was out of town and they didn't make it, which I was sad, but they are replacing those. So as you can see in this diagram, you need a container to hold the water. It's called a reservoir, and we're going to talk about that. You need a way to give oxygen to your roots of your plants. So usually you can use an air pump and an air stone, like a common aquarium type pump to put air into the water. It's not absolutely necessary, but it's works a lot better. It makes your plants a lot healthier. As you can see in this graphic here, the roots are partially out of the water, and that if you don't have an air pump, this allows the oxygen, the air, to get to the roots a little bit. If you're going to do this, you want to keep about 1 to 1.5 inches out of the roots out of the water. There's a subcategory of this design. It's called a floating raft design, where instead of the plants being held above the water like this, you actually take a piece of foam board and put holes in it that your little pots sit in, and they float on the surface of the water. This is a kind of a low maintenance system because as the water gets used up, evaporates a little bit, or it gets absorbed by the plants, your floating raft actually lowers into the water. So that's just a subcategory of that. So if you're thinking about what plants you want to grow, that's a good consideration. And in this method, you can grow almost any kind of plants. This is a very common method. The next system that I want to show you is a really easy, very easy, simple way of doing hydroponic systems. This is called a wick system. It's also passive. It's called, this is a method of passive hydroponics because you don't have to have a pump or water moving or circulating. This is also a great method for beginners to use. It requires the least amount of materials of all the methods. It's great for beginners because it's easy. So what this does is you have these plants that are held above the water reservoir, and they have a wick, and the wick is usually made out of cotton. I have some to show you at the end. A cotton that could be made out of a strip of burlap, anything that will pull the water up into the substrate, into the plant. This is a great method for smaller plants. It's not so great for bigger plants. So there's no pump, no moving parts. It is good for crops that like to be wet, and you can pour water through the top too, through the top of the plant, and let it run through, and then it's pulled back up. So that would be a good way to water it so they don't get too dry in those pots. It is not the best, most effective system. It needs a little more observation, maintenance to make sure that that water doesn't get too low, or that your wicks don't have a problem drawing the water up. Okay, the next one I want to tell you about is called ebb and flow. So another word for this is flood and drain. If you've ever heard that, they mean the same thing. So this one requires a pump. So this one is pumping water up into the container there, as you can see in the picture. So the pump is pumping the water up into the container, and it pumps usually for about 20 to 30 minutes. And then the pump shuts off, so you can put it on a timer, and the water drains back out. It can either drain out through a tube, or often there are holes in the bottom of the reservoir where the water runs out back into the reservoir. So the water is recirculated all the time. So it's more of an active, it's called an active recovery system. The water is recirculated. This is something that's used often in commercial systems, but you can use a smaller version of this at home. The mediums, we'll talk about the growing mediums in a minute, but this one usually uses rock wool or grow rocks as your medium in there. So that's not soil in the picture. That is a non-soil growing medium. These are low maintenance systems, and they also work very, very well, very effective for growing plants. You can grow almost anything in this kind of system. You can, instead of using this, you can also use, instead of using a container like this also works for grow bags or fabric pots, because the water is going to drain back out. As long as it drains into the reservoir and it's recirculated, that would work. Okay, this one is called nutrient film. You might hear it called NTF sometimes. They call it, that's another acronym for it. So in this case, you don't have a lot of substrate, just enough to, you know, if you have these little net pots to hold the plant up, or maybe if it's a bigger plant, none at all. So how this works is it's another active recovery system. The water in the pump is drawn up and it runs through a channel. Common channels that you might see are pieces of gutter. You can repurpose old gutters. A lot of times you'll see these as PVC pipes with holes cut in them, or tubes put in them to hold the plants. So the roots are subjected to a constant circulation of water running through. So this pump doesn't go on and off, it runs all the time, and the water goes up into the channel and runs across the roots. So it has to be angled a little bit, just about 1 to 4% angle, not too steep, so that the water runs down to the end and back into the reservoir. These are really great for large operations. These are, you know, commercial, as you saw earlier, some of those pictures I showed you of the places that are grown in these buildings in cities. A lot of times they'll use a system like this. You can make it as complicated as you want with multiple channels in layers and rows and all kinds of things. So those are great. They're used extensively commercially. They are really, really effective, but you need constant attention, because if you think about it, it's plugged in, that pump is plugged in. If you have a power outage, the plants get no water. A lot of places, like if they're commercial growers, they'll have backup generators just to make sure that they keep the water flowing over those roots. If there's no water to the roots will dry out and your plants will suffer or could die pretty quickly. The other good thing about this is it requires less water. Since the water is constantly running through, you don't have them sitting in that big tub of water. You have the small amount of water that keeps being recirculated. So it's actually lighter. It's not as heavy, because as you know, water is pretty heavy. Water weighs about 8 1/3 pounds per gallon. So if you have a big system there, you have a lot of gallons of water. That's a very heavy system. So this is, since it requires less water, it's lightweight. These are really good systems for growing greens, herbs, and strawberries. They're not really good for large crops, because if anything that's going to get a lot of roots, you're going to have a problem in that tubing. If the roots clog it up and the water can't flow through, then it's not going to work for you. You need a pretty high-powered pump too to keep that water flowing all the time. So you would have to probably get one specifically for this purpose. This is actually the kind of system that I dream of setting up one day. Right now I'm still pretty small, but I need more space. I want to put a whole addition on my house so I can do a nice indoor hydroponic garden, is like my fantasy right now. So the final system I want to tell you about is a drip system. And this is actually, if you ever use drip irrigation in your garden, it's pretty much the same thing. So as you can see in the graphic here, the pump takes water out of the reservoir and it pumps it up to there's a little drip that's placed at the base of each plant. So it supplies the water directly to that plant. And runs through the substrate and then drains back into the reservoir and recirculates again. So this is another form of active recovery. So the water is pumped repeatedly through the system. The drip is on continuously. This is used a lot by farmers in high tunnels, and previously a lot of this was a non-recovery, because they would drip the water through and then let the water drain out the bottom and basically go into the ground. But it can be recovered, or it's possible to do this system where you're using more water all the time. A lot of the medium they use in here is rock wool, and we'll talk more about what that is in a minute. You can use perlite or clay pellets also. So what's good to grow in this? Leafy greens and larger flowering crops can be grown this way because you have more space, like tomatoes, cucumbers, and peppers. So plants are plants. Your plants indoors need the same things that your plants need outdoors. They have to go through the photosynthesis process, which means that they require the energy from light and water and air, the carbon dioxide from the air, to go through the process of photosynthesis, and they produce oxygen and sugars. They need water, light, and air. They also need nutrients, microbes, and some physical support. In the outdoor garden, your plants receive a lot of nutrients from things you put in your soil itself, or the compost or fertilizers that you put in your soil, and microbes that live out in nature or that you add to your soil. And your soil physically supports the plant, it holds it up. When you're doing hydroponic gardening, you have to supply these things yourself. So you have to the nutrient situation is pretty important because your plants aren't getting anything from that soil or that compost. They have to get everything from the nutrients that you put in that water. So we'll talk about the nutrient solution. Some of the nutrient solutions also provide microbes and enzymes to your plants. And your substrate or your growing medium is going to give them that physical support that they would have gotten from soil if they were outdoors. So they need the same things. They need all of that. So if you're going to make a checklist, you want to start this, what do you absolutely have to have? Filtered water for your reservoir. Well water, I have well water. It's not recommended to use that because I'm going to tell you, my well water is terrible. Even though I have a water softener, the water softener puts a lot of salts into the water, and you don't want to put those salts into your system. So it's best to use a filtered water. I use distilled water. That's probably the top of the line. Reverse osmosis system water you can use. So that'll work. Anything that's good water. If you're on city water and you have good water, that should be fine. So you do need water. I buy a lot of bottles of distilled water. You need a water reservoir, something to hold that water. No matter what kind of system you have, something has to hold the water and the nutrient solution. You need a light source, although it's possible in the summer to use natural daylight. In the wintertime, if you're trying to garden now, you're not going to get enough hours of daylight from the natural light, so you're going to need to supplement at least with some kind of grow lights, and we're going to talk about the options for that in a minute. You need a non-soil growing medium. We're also going to talk about all the options you can use for that. A nutrient solution, very important, and then you're going to need either plants or seeds. It can be done either way, and we'll talk about choices of that. If you are really into this, or you want to do a certain kind of system, these are some other supplies that are recommended, but not absolutely essential. If you are going to use any of these systems that circulate water, that have where your plants have limited access to oxygen, the roots do, you're going to need an air stone and pump. A lot of the kits, we'll talk about kits in a minute, come with those. If you're not using a kit and building your own, you can buy just a regular aquarium pump, and air stone will work. If you want to make sure that your light source is kept on often enough, if you don't have it, the type of light that comes with its own timer, you might want to invest in either a manual timer, the old-fashioned manual timer, or I use smart plugs, so that I have an app. So my app, I can control when lights go on and off, which is really cool because even when I'm out of town, I can see and control when the lights come on and off. Another option, net pots are like little baskets that your plants can fit in that you can put the substrate in. Not every system needs a net pot, but some do. Another recommendation is an EC meter and a pH meter. Now, what is an EC meter? So EC stands for electrical conductivity. So what this meter does is it actually measures the flow of nutrients through the water system. It measures the nutrients in the water, and what's required for this depends on what you're trying to grow. So if you have a meter and you know what you're growing, you can make sure that you're putting enough nutrients in, or not too many nutrients, because too many nutrients is just as bad. And you can control that with this meter, because it will measure that. If your EC gets too high, the plants won't absorb the nutrients. If it's too low, you'll have a really poor yield. So it's more nutrients in your water, the higher the EC measurement will be. And then another thing is a pH meter. You don't have to have a regular meter. You can just use those regular dip test strips that you dip in, but your water needs to be a little bit on the acid side, so below 7. The optimal, they say, is 6.3 pH, but a range of about 5.4 to 7 is fine. So it's important to check your pH. You want to check your water before you add your nutrients. See what your natural pH is of the water you're using, and then adjust it accordingly. If you need to lower the pH, they make solutions. There are pH adjusting solutions you can use, or you can simply add something that's more acidic, like a little lemon juice or citric acid that you use in canning tomatoes, the little citric acid powder. Or you can use, vinegar is an acid that will lower your pH. If you're going to add something, make sure that you retest your water and make sure you don't overdo it. Again, if your pH is too high or too low, the plants can't use those nutrients you're giving them efficiently. So it's kind of important to check your pH. So another option, you need the air circulation. Some kits come with fans. If you're not getting enough air circulation, I haven't found this to be a problem. If your air is circulating, then you can, not getting enough air, you can get a fan. Some kits come with a fan, or you can buy an extra fan. A grow tent is, I've seen it recommended. Basically, this is for a larger production. You can make a little environment just for your plants to grow in, where you can better control the temperature and the humidity. So if your house is really, really dry and you want to increase the humidity, you may consider getting a grow tent to keep your plants in a better environment for growing. So what can you use for a reservoir? Well, basically almost anything. Storage totes, big bins like that. You can build one out of wood and use a liner made out of that black plastic or something like that, or comes with a liner, so you don't want the water running out. You can even use glass or plastic bottles or jars. As you can see in the picture here, they're using just mason jars. Of course, that's a little higher maintenance. You got to keep an eye on it. And like I said before, they recommend painting the outside of these containers with a dark colored paint, so that you don't have a lot of sunlight getting in there and problem with algae growing. So the design I actually read about, they put a piece of tape along the side and then painted it and then pulled the tape off, so you have actual little window where you can check on your roots of your plants. Almost anything that will hold water, you can use any kind of bin, bucket, a container. I have plans of growing my strawberries in a old styrofoam cooler that was somebody shipped something in dry ice to me at one time, and it's been stuck in my garage because I don't want to throw styrofoam in the trash. If it's put out in the environment, it's there forever. So how can I repurpose this? So I'm thinking about how I can take the lid and cut holes in it for my pots and use that as a deep water culture reservoir. excuse me 1 second. I have to get my dog. She can't walk and she's barking at me. I'll be right back. Sorry about that. She's 13 years old and can't walk, and so she barks at me to help her get up. Any kind of system that you make, if you're making something that's just a plastic storage tote or something like that, and you want it to be out in your living room and it doesn't really look very pretty, you can always build a frame or put a box around it to make it look nicer. So those are your reservoirs. Very, very important, a light source. So let's talk about this a second. LED lights are very, very common for grow lights these days. And if you've ever got one or had one, you'll notice some of the lights are red and some of the lights are blue and some of the lights are white. And if you wondered what those colors are for, the blue lights that you see are good for leafy greens. If you have more blue light, you get spicier greens. If you have less blue light, you get milder flavor of greens. So that's really interesting. I like mine spicy, so I would prefer to have a little bit more blue light. And it also makes more compact plants, which is also great for hydroponic gardening, because if your plants get too big, it's hard to manage them. The intensity of the light is really important. The brighter lights are good for growing things faster and growing. If you have a kit, you'll notice it has different things. So the bright lights usually are for the greener things. They need a lot of the light, and then you can reduce the intensity if you're growing flowers or fruit or herbs that don't need as bright a light. So my kit actually has settings for what I'm growing in that garden. Duration. If you're using artificial light, most things minimally 14 hours a day to 16 or more, up to 20, depending on what it is. I have my lettuce garden set on 15.5 hours, and it does great in those conditions. LED grow lights, as you see, those are what are shown in this picture. Those are very, very common nowadays. The advantage of LED grow lights is they use less energy, so they're more energy efficient to run. The disadvantage is they tend to be a little bit more expensive than other types of lighting, but they also will last longer. So I use LED grow lights. The old-fashioned ones, if you still have any of these around, were fluorescent bulbs. The problem with fluorescent bulbs is, unlike the LED lights, which use a full light spectrum, including white light, which people prefer because it makes it look better. But you don't absolutely have to have white light. And the red light, I forgot to tell you what the red light does. The red light is great for flowers and fruit because it makes the plant sturdier, thicker stems, more hardy plants to support that fruit. So that's what the red lights do. Fluorescent lights they produce light in a blue-green kind of spectrum. So you don't get most fluorescent lights, you don't get that red light. As we said earlier, natural light is fine. But in the winter, you're going to have to supplement with some artificial lighting because they just won't get enough hours. When you have a light source like this, you want to keep your plants about 2 inches away. In this picture, it looks like they're getting a little close, but I've had this happen to me before where the plants get too close and they touch the light and they start burning at the edges. So you have to be careful. Most lights are able to be raised. So you can raise those as the plants grow. If your light won't raise, another option is to prune your plants. So you can keep them pruned down. It's actually pretty good for them to prune them and cut them regularly. It makes them produce more. And it'll also keep them from getting too close to the light. Okay, options for growing mediums. This is basically what holds your plant up, and also which keeps the roots moist and aerated and keeps the water close to the roots. Very, very common one that you see nowadays is coconut fiber, also called cocoa coir or cocoa fiber. This is the advantage of this is that it is organic and it does decompose, so you can compost it when you're done using it. A lot of the little grow pellets that come with the systems are made out of coconut fiber or peat moss. So those are coconut fiber, of course, is more sustainable than peat moss these days. But those are growing mediums that you might see in those little plugs that you get with kits. Another possibility is sand. The problem with sand is that it doesn't hold water very well. It runs out, so you have to make sure that your plants aren't getting dried out. It's also rather heavy. So that's an option that's pretty inexpensive. Everybody probably is familiar with vermiculite and perlite. Rice husks are also in the same category. It's pretty lightweight, so lightweight substance that can be used. These rice husk, vermiculite, and perlite are good for wick systems. If you're using coconut fiber, make sure that you rinse it well before you use it, because it can have some salts in it, and salts are not good for your plant. So rinse that out before you use it. Clay pellets. So I have some clay pellets that I'm going to use to grow my strawberries and put them in my little net pots. The good advantage of clay pellets is that they are reusable. So after you're done with that plant, you can wash your clay pellets off and use them in your next garden. They're about the only thing on this list that's reusable. So it's sustainable in that way that you can keep using them over and over again. Other substrates, you pretty much have to get rid of them. You can don't want to throw them out, you can put them out, work them into your garden. So they'll always help your outdoor garden by adding those when you're done. So rock wool, what rock wool is it's superheated rock and chalk or limestone, volcanic rock and limestone that has been crushed up and superheated, and then they spin it up like wool. So that's why it's called rock wool. And you can buy this in cubes or plugs. The plugs are really awesome for starting seeds. And the cubes you can use as, like you see here, there's a cube or slab that your plant can actually grow in. Your roots can grow through. These are a really great way for a beginner, a substrate for a beginner, if you don't care that it's not organic, completely organic, because it's rock, but it works really well. Any kind of medium that you're going to use, any kind of growing medium, you want to make sure that you rinse it or even soak it in water for 24 hours before putting it in there, in case it has any kind of soil, debris, residues on it that could be harmful to your plants. So those are some options for growing mediums. All right, really important, nutrient solutions. Like we said before, your hydroponic plants need everything that your outdoor plants need, but they're not getting it from the soil. So you can make your own. There are recipes out there for making your own. If you were doing a large scale system where you had to buy a lot of nutrients, it'd probably be less expensive to buy all the individual parts and mix up your own. But for home hydroponic gardeners, your options would probably be better to purchase either a liquid solution specially designed for hydroponics, and there are several options out there, or a dry fertilizer that you mix with water. The one I have is a concentrate, so you mix it with water, and then that's your concentrate, and then you take that concentrate and then you mix it with water when you're ready to use it. So liquid fertilizers are usually easier. You don't have to worry about them not mixing well. Dry fertilizers, you can, like anything you mix up, you can get chunks or lumps and things like that. So you have to be really careful, because if you have a dry fertilizer that has pieces that didn't dissolve, they could clog up a pump or tubes or anything like that. So what your nutrient solution needs to have is your macronutrients, which is your NPK, your nitrogen, your phosphorus, your potassium, everything that you put on any of your other plants. Your hydroponic plants need that too. And usually the fertilizers that you buy, they can be organic, but for the most part, they are chemical fertilizers. They have the same ingredients, but they are chemical fertilizers. And the actual advantage of using those for hydroponic gardening is that you can use much less fertilizer to get the same results. So that's an advantage of using a non-organic chemical solution. The other things you have to make sure that your plants are getting are those important micronutrients. As you can see in the graphic here, the most important micronutrients are calcium, magnesium, and sulfur. Definitely, if you want to grow tomatoes, you need to make sure that your plants are getting enough calcium. Some of the other micronutrients that you probably don't put on your garden plants, but you will need to put them on when you're hydroponic, because in the garden, they get them from the soil, in addition to those enzymes and beneficial microbes. But when you are gardening hydroponically, you need to make sure that your fertilizer contains boron, chlorine, copper, iron, manganese, molybdenum, and zinc for your plants. All right, what kind of plants do you want to grow? That's the other thing you have to make a decision. You can grow vegetables, of course, especially greens, fruits. Strawberries are a good option. Herbs grow really well hydroponically, indoor herb garden without soil. And you can even grow flowers hydroponically. So good choices: lettuce, herbs, mustard, kale, amaranth, Swiss chard. Swiss chard does really well hydroponically too. If you're going to do vegetables like tomatoes, cucumbers, or peppers, choose small, compact plants, because when they get too big, they're difficult to manage in a home hydroponic system. Now, do you want to start from seed or use plants? Well, you can do either way. It just depends on what you're growing. Lettuce is so easy to start from seed. I always start my lettuce from seed. Almost anything that you start from seeds indoors that you're going to plant outside can be grown hydroponically. So if you're starting tomato seeds right now for your spring garden, you can actually transplant those. Once you get a seedling, you can transplant those into your hydroponic garden. So that's an option too. I start my lettuce seeds directly into my hydroponic system. So that anything that's like that, herbs, simple herbs, could be done that way. You can also start cuttings. So we've actually been talking about starting lavender. And you can make lavender cuttings and root them and then grow them hydroponically. So things that you can grow by cutting and rooting, you can grow them hydroponically. Now, if you want to, you can take a seedling that was grown in soil and transplant that into your hydroponic garden. But you need to make sure that you're not bringing in bugs or diseases or anything and putting them into your hydroponic system. So what you need to do is, if you're going to take a seedling, and I did this with strawberries, you want to carefully wash the roots off with water, get every bit of dirt and things that you can there. And then you can treat them with a 3% hydrogen peroxide solution, just your standard hydrogen peroxide that you get in the brown bottle at the drugstore. And that will kill any kind of insect larvae or anything that you might be having on your plant, because you don't want to bring those in. If you're planting multiple plants in the same system, you need to make sure that you remember that different plants have different requirements for light and nutrients and things like that. So I plant all the same thing in one system. So my lettuce system is all lettuce. I had some herbs in there once and they didn't do very well because they didn't grow at the same rate. The light was too hot, too low for the herbs and too high for the plants. So it's really good to do all the same thing at once. I would recommend it, not absolutely essential. Just make sure if you're mixing plants in one system that they need the same nutrients and the same light requirements and the same pH requirements. So I'm going to give you some recommendations here. Any kind of greens, lettuces, microgreens are highly recommended for beginners if you're just starting out. This is my favorite thing to grow. I don't know how else to say that. It's fast, it's easy. I start lettuce seeds indoors, and in the hydroponic system, I am ready to harvest my lettuce in, I actually looked, 19 days. 19 days from planting the seeds to having a salad. So it's easy, it's gratifying to see it, especially if you have kids. You want the kids to watch something growing. They sprout really quickly, and you can get a salad pretty quickly. Microgreens are even faster. Sprouts, I've grown sprouts before. If you like sprouts for to put on salads or in sandwiches, you can grow those hydroponically. Those are pretty much always grown hydroponically anyway. Another advantage is it's what we call cut and come again. So the lettuce, you cut off a few leaves and put them in your salad, and then a few days later you can go back and more leaves will grow and you can cut them too. So I always cut the outside leaves, and then you can keep harvesting. So right now my lettuce garden, I looked at it this morning, it's been going for 75 days. I've been constantly using it. Of course, you can't really use it every day unless you have a really big garden, or you'll cut too much. But it's constantly been going now for 75 days. It's about at its limit, though. I keep thinking I'm going to shut it down and take the greens out, but then it starts growing again. So I love doing this too, because I have a guinea pig, so I don't waste anything. Once it gets to be almost done, I cut all those stubs off, and my guinea pig loves them. So, and then I compost the roots and the other parts that are left. So greens, pH requirement about 5.5 to 6. For seeds, it needs to be a little higher, 6.4. So once you're starting your seeds, keep your pH around 6.4, and then you can drop it a little bit once your plants are mature. And also you want to not get them out in the direct sun, because as you know, greens like a little bit cooler weather, usually under 70 degrees, and you want to limit the direct sun contact. As far as the EC, if you're using an EC meter, the EC for these greens is usually about 1.2 to 1.8 is what they recommend. EC can be interpreted too as TDS, which is the total dissolved solids. If you have a meter that shows that, lettuce needs 768 to 1,152 dissolved solids, which is basically the nutrients that are in the solution. Okay, strawberries. This is the easiest fruit. If you want to grow strawberries, if I were a teacher in a classroom, I would be growing strawberries for my class indoors, because all kids love strawberries. If you are going to grow hydroponic strawberries indoors, though, the ones that you grow outdoors, they need those weather cues. They need a certain amount of cold, a certain amount of warmth, especially the June-bearing strawberries, to know when to start blooming and when to start producing. If you're growing them indoors, you can actually get strawberries all year round, but you want to get a day-neutral variety. A little bit hard to find around Delaware. You might be able to find some online. So day neutral doesn't rely on those cues of temperature and light and things to start producing. They just keep going. If you can't find day neutral, you can try the everbearing. That's the second best option. They're not quite as uninfluenced by light and weather as day neutral, but they can work. Strawberries are notoriously difficult to start from seed. They require that stratification, cold stratification, and all that process to start. So they're a little bit harder, but you can easily buy plants If your plants are in dirt, remember to clean the roots off and you can put them in a hydroponic system. Because if you're starting them from seeds, it can take a long time before you actually even get them to bloom, and then even longer before you get your strawberries. So this is a long time commitment if you're going to grow strawberries from seed. So if you want more quicker results, buy seedlings rather than seeds. And there are varieties out there that are recommended specifically for growing hydroponically, so you can look for that. Remember that strawberries are a little bit bigger, and make sure that you put them in a container that's big enough. I'm using 3-inch net pots for mine. This system here, you'll see a lot. These are these vertical hydroponic gardens that they use for strawberries quite often in commercial settings. So let's see. Seed starting, the variety Deliz is one of the easier ones to start from seeds if you're considering that. And other varieties that are everbearing that are good to use, Evie, Seascape, and Sweet Charlie will work. Strawberries need 14 to 16 hours of light per day. When they're flowering, they could use a little extra phosphorus in their nutrient solution. Obviously, they can't spread, so if you get runners, you can prune them off or you can transplant them. And the thing about them, just like outdoors, you need to make sure that you keep the crown. Like when you plant them outdoors, you keep the crown at the soil level. You want to keep the crown out of the water to prevent root rot, because they are still susceptible to root rot. The EC recommendations for strawberries is 1.8 to 2.2. And the TDS in parts per million is 1,152 to 1408. So if you're using an EC meter and you want to carefully measure that, that's the recommendations for those. And the vegetable I want to talk to you about, another common thing that people grow, are tomatoes, which again is like how I got started. So again, if you're growing tomatoes or peppers or any of those other kind of vegetables, cucumbers, choose the compact or ones that are meant to be grown in a pot or like a patio type tomato. You want to get smaller ones. So you want to choose those container varieties. You can, like we said earlier, start from seeds like you do your other tomatoes, or seedlings. Start seeds as normal and then just transplant them into your hydroponic system once they get the roots coming out of the bottom of the container. So some recommended varieties for growing hydroponically: Tasmanian chocolate is a kind of tomato, a dwarf golden heart, a dwarf purple heart, or serendipity, and then one called red robin, which is a miniature cherry plant. So the same things apply if you're growing tomatoes to peppers. Get small compact plants, and they'll work better for you. The EC recommendation for tomatoes is a little bit higher, 2.0 to 4.0, and also the TDS is 1280 to 2560 for them to grow well. And I know you're thinking, if I'm growing plants in my house, I don't have any insects to pollinate my plants. So here's a picture of a bee pollinating a tomato plant. If you're like me, you do not have bees inside your house. So how do you pollinate these? Well, you're going to have to hand pollinate them or use a fan. So like we were talking about the fan earlier, when you have something that'll move the air around, it will help to move that pollen from one flower to another, or within the same flower if they're self-pollinating. So if you want to hand pollinate your plants, you can take a small paintbrush or a little makeup brush, and you can actually get some of the pollen on the outside and move it to the inside of your plant. You know that if they're not well pollinated, they won't produce either not produce at all or produce misshapen fruit. I'm sure everybody's seen a cucumber that's deformed. That was a lack of efficient pollination usually. So if you're growing lettuces, no worries, you don't have to pollinate lettuce. This is only for things that are fruiting like tomatoes and strawberries that need to be pollinated in order to produce. All right, potential problems. Not a lot of problems. Algae can be a big problem, so that's why you want to make sure that you don't have your sun shining on your nutrients. I mean, nutrients make you your water solution prone to growths of things because it has nutrients in it. Mildew is another problem. Root rot. Although insects aren't a big problem, you could possibly get things like aphids, thrips, mites, and whiteflies. These are usually caused by being brought in from outdoors or taking your plants outdoors, to get them a little sun, and then insects land on them and you bring them back in and get them into your system. So you need to be careful with insects. And if you do happen to get any insects, you can clean them off like you do on your house plants with a mild, dishwashing liquid solution. So your solution to keeping out pathogens and bacteria and stuff is to keep your system clean. If you're growing lettuce, just wait till your lettuce is done and you're done harvesting it all, and then take your whole system apart and clean it thoroughly. You can wash it with dishwashing liquid also. You can also use a mild bleach solution to make sure you disinfect it and get it all clean, and then start your next lettuce garden over again. If you have plants that are growing long-term, like tomatoes or strawberries, periodically keep an eye on it. If it looks like it, needs work, maybe after a month or so, just take the plants out temporarily, give it a good cleaning, replace your nutrient solution, and start over again. So sanitation, just like in your garden, is the most important way to keep your system healthy. Also make sure that you keep your water at the appropriate level. That will also help cut down on algae and other things that grow in water. Mold is actually not a big problem, because some molds, if you see mold growing on your substrate, might not be a bad thing. There are some molds that are actually beneficial to the plants. So I tend to, if it's not seem to cause a problem, I kind of let it be. And last but not least, as master gardeners, I'm going to remind you that we cannot recommend any certain brands. So as an example, I wanted to show you an example of a hydroponic garden kit. This is the easiest way if you're a beginner and you can afford it, because it's a little bit pricier than just making your own. These are awesome way to get started, because it really helps you learn the whole system, because everything is together. Everything comes with it. This is an arrow garden. I have 2 of them. If you go look at Consumer Reports or anything else about ratings for things, these are always at the top. There's a lot of other ones out there, a lot of choices. I have a total of 4 kits. 2 of them are arrow gardens and 2 of them are more less expensive brands. They can be anywhere from, you can get a simple kit for probably $30 somewhere, and they go all the way up. The arrow gardens usually run about $80. Some of the big ones could go up to $900, and you can get big systems that cost into the thousands if you really want to go that route. I have one of these. I think the one in the picture here is called the Harvest model. I have one of those, but my favorite is called the Bounty, only because I'm pretty high tech, and it's compatible with my Echo Dot and my apps. The Arrow Garden comes with an app that I can control things. I can monitor the system when I'm away. I can see if the water's getting low. If it's time to add more nutrients, it tells you all of that. So that's great. The kind of things that you get in a kit, the little grow basket, as you can see, which is another name for a net pot, only this is what fits into the garden. You will get the grow sponge. Sometimes they're made out of cocoa core, or peat moss. The Arrow Garden kits will come with seeds. Otherwise, you can always use your own seeds. There's a label. I actually don't use these because I know what I planted, but the label is also helpful for keeping light out if you want to use those. And the little dome you put on the top, and you leave it on until the plant grows up to touch the top. That keeps a more humid, protected environment in there for your seeds to start. So this is the one I use. It says just add water, but you also have to add nutrients. And they will sprout. Lettuces will sprout really quickly. Like I said, they say 3 weeks. I harvested mine in 19 days, and they keep going for months if you're growing lettuces. And you can see here, this one's growing tomatoes, which I have not tried yet. So that's just an example that you might want to consider. And here is a resource list that I sent you. I want to mention that this book that's on your list, I have this book, and it has some pretty advanced systems in there. If you really want to go all out and you're very crafty and handy and you have somebody that likes to build things, there's a lot of examples in that book for making some pretty cool systems, and gives you supply lists and everything, and gives you a lot more information. And also remind you that the University of Delaware and Del State Cooperative Extension are equal providers for all. And we also want to remind you that our Kent County Master Gardeners, we have workshops every quarter. Make sure that you're on our email list or check our websites to find out what's coming up. And then again, the Garden Advice Program, we can come to your house and help you for $100. Also, if you live in Kent County, you can call our helpline, and someone will get back to you with answers to your questions or problems. And last but not least, if you're really excited or interested in learning to become a master gardener yourself, we do have a new class starting up in 2023 in the fall. If you go to our website, you can get more information there and find out how you can apply. Okay, and it's time for question time. So remember that anything that I tell you, that's the brand name of a product, is not an endorsement of that product. There's a lot of different brands out there, and that's just one example. Okay, so let's get out of this, and I am going to turn my camera back on here and see if anybody has any questions for me. And then after that, I know we're running out of time. After that, we'll do a little show and tell if anybody wants to hang out and you're interested. So Kathy, do we have questions?
We do. There's a lot of great questions.
Okay.
I'm just going to basically go in order.
Okay.
The first two questions are about the type of water. One is, can you use the water from your dehumidifier? And the other is, can rainwater be used?
I wouldn't use rainwater because I don't know, what's in that. You can always get your water tested, and you can always do the pH test and all that. Water from a dehumidifier is probably okay, but again, I would test the pH before I put it into my system. They recommend filtered water, so if you have a refrigerator that does the filter and those kinds of things, if you have good tap water, then it's fine. I would probably avoid rainwater because if I have a rain barrel and I use rainwater to water my garden, but it's not always, things get in it, and so I wouldn't recommend that, because you really want to keep it clean and pure as you can. And like I said, my well water is terrible, so I buy distilled water all the time.
Okay. Next question is, can peas be grown this way indoors? This person's tired of pea plants withering quickly outside.
You can try anything. My daughter is actually growing peas right now in hers. You just have to remember that pea plants can get tall. So you need to have a way of managing that. If you think you can manage that and build your own and make sure you get them enough light, I'd say go for it. Almost anything can be grown indoors. You just have to, I would probably use caution. The only thing I would use caution in growing indoors is root vegetables, because you have to remember that if I grow sweet potatoes, if I'm growing a sweet potato, where is the sweet potato going to be? Is it going to be sitting in my nutrient solution, it might not be a good idea. So I wouldn't recommend root vegetables, but anything, peas should be fine. You know, anything else that you grow, as long as you make sure you have enough space for that.
Okay, what system would you recommend for off-grid / a tiny home, or if the home is a camper?
Right. Well, I've seen lots of examples for that. So off grid, you probably need a passive system. So you're not going to have electricity to generate that, pumps and things like that. So the wick system would work for that, or the bottle that I talked about. A lot of people use like bottle systems even in campers or things like that, where you just have a, like I said, a glass bottle that's painted, you know, black usually, because you don't want the algae to grow inside, or any dark color. And then you would take like maybe a rock wool or a core plug, and once you start your plant separately or put a seedling in there, and once the roots are growing out the bottom, you can put that into a bottle, and the roots will grow into the solution, and that works great. So that's a great small system, or the wick system, things that don't rely on electricity. Of course, you always need to make sure that you have it in a sunny spot, place where it gets enough light. So probably better to do something like that in the summer months.
Okay. This person has a store-bought kit, which worked great for 5 years, but now it keeps getting algae, which kills the plant. How do I stop algae from growing in it?
Well, algae grows because of getting too much light. So first of all, you need to make sure you clean it and disinfect it between plantings, and then the bleach and help get all that out of there. Algae is really, it grows. I mean, you put nutrients in there, that's going to promote the growth of algae. So you just have to keep cleaning it, and be careful about getting it too much light. Like I said, those little covers, the little covers that you can put over your grow pads will help with that, because they will help keep light out off of your growing medium. Make sure that those are the main things that promote algae.
Well, I'm going to skip a question just because it's related to that. This person asks to add on to the question of algae growth. It sounds like you're recommending probably bleach, but they're also asking if vinegar or alcohol would be appropriate. And do you sterilize all components of the hydroponic system?
You can, alcohol is great. That's another recommendation that I've seen. The bleach is just really, really weak solution, like a tablespoon in a gallon of water would work. It's not absolutely necessary. Honestly, I wash everything in my dish liquid, and I haven't had a problem. But if I started having problems, then I would probably use, I would probably wipe things with alcohol. That would be a good solution, or use the bleach solution to get rid of the problem. But honestly, I haven't had much of a problem, because I've just been growing lettuce. So once it's done, I clean all the parts. I clean the little baskets and reuse them. Of course, I don't reuse the little core pods. They go into the compost. I clean my baskets. I clean my the top tray. I clean the reservoir. I clean off the pumps and all the parts and everything that touches the water. And I have not yet had a problem, knock on wood. So, but I'm just saying, you just keep it as clean as you can, and shouldn't, algae happens. So just clean it up.
Would you recommend vinegar? Can that also be used?
Sure. Vinegar is perfectly natural. So just anything you use, make sure you rinse it thoroughly, because you don't want that to get into your plants. And if you want to keep your system really healthy after you sanitize it, don't wipe it dry, just let it air dry. And that'll prevent you spreading anything else in there off of a towel or other materials.
So another algae question. Do you need to worry about algae growth in an active system or just the passive systems?
Algae will grow anywhere. You have nutrients. It'll grow if it gets enough light. It won't grow without light. So algae is a plant that's green. It requires, photosynthesis also. So if you deprive it of light, then you have less of a problem.
Okay. Is there a special regimen that should be followed when using fungicides compared to conventional gardening?
I don't use fungicides, so I can't really address that. I don't use fungicides at all. My outdoor garden is completely organic, and I tend to, if I tend to be the type where if my garden really gets really sick, something gets really sick, then I remove it and replace it and start over again. So of course, prevention is the best thing. Funguses, once you've got them, they're hard to get rid of, but they can be prevented. Actually, neem oil will prevent funguses in your garden, so that can be used indoors also.
Okay. How long will strawberry plants last in a hydroponic system?
Strawberries are perennial, so as long as you take care of them, they should keep going and going and going. Outdoor strawberries are usually, they say, good for about 5 to 7 years. My outdoor strawberries keep growing. They reseed themselves, so they put out runners, and then I get new plants, which it's going to be hard to do indoors. There's a way you could make it so that the runners go into a different pot and start it. That's possible. But they should, I would say, at least 5 years or longer.
Okay. And then this question is, I don't really understand this question, but maybe you will. When do you start your system over?
It depends on what you're growing. So for do they want to know about lettuce?
It doesn't specify.
Okay, so let me talk about lettuce because that's what I have the most experience with. So I plant my lettuces, and like I said, right now it's been out there for about 75 days, and I can tell it's ready. There's two ways I can tell it's ready. I start getting a little bit of like die off of the lower leaves. Also, I've cut them back so much, I have a lot of stubs. And then I basically, my little core plug is full. It's overwhelmed. If I pull the thing out, there's roots that go out everywhere. It's not producing anymore. It's not helping me anymore. So it's time to, feed the guinea pig and start new seeds. So I would say if you're growing lettuce, give it, it depends on your situation. If you cut it often, it'll actually last longer. My AeroGarden Bounty has a vacation mode setting, which I love. So it actually reduces the light and reduces things to make it not use as much water and things while you're away. But when I'm on vacation, nobody is there harvesting. Nobody is there harvesting that lettuce. So it tends to, the bottom leaves do, what anything does outside, they'll get big and they'll fall over, and it doesn't last as long. But if you're constantly eating the lettuce, constantly harvesting that, it'll go actually longer than that, 75 days, which is what, like 2.5 months. They said it can go up to 4. I think I've done it for up to 4 months before when I've been home.
Okay. This one's pretty specific. Does the AeroGarden have a built-in air pump?
Yes, it does have a pump. Yeah. It pumps air and recirculates the water. So the roots are growing down into the water, and it's constantly getting its supply of oxygen and nutrients rotating through there. And mine will tell you, I think the Bounty does too. It'll tell you when you set it up, you start it, and it'll tell you when it's time to add more nutrients. So you don't have to put it on your calendar or have, reminders or anything. It'll tell you, it'll beep at you. And then the light will turn red, and it'll be like time to have nutrients, even though my app reminds me too. And then the water, it has a thing on the front that tells you when the water is lower. Some of the less expensive systems will just have a little window where you can see the water level, and you just know that if the roots are getting too much out of the water, you need to add more. But you also don't want to make it too high, because you don't want the roots to be completely submerged in the water in general, because that promotes, they don't get enough oxygen, and even if you have a pump, and that promotes root rots and all kinds of problems if your roots aren't getting enough air.
What type of fertilizer is recommended?
I would recommend something that's especially designed for hydroponics. So I will tell you what I use. I actually have a little show and tell kit here. So I don't know if you can see this, This comes with the Aero Garden. When you order an Aero Garden, it comes with a little bottle of this. Of course, it doesn't last forever. So this is specifically designed for hydroponic gardens. You can use it on house plants. You can use it on outdoor plants. So this one, the NPK is 436. So that's 4% nitrogen, 3% phosphorus, and 6% potassium. Also, I didn't mention this, but when you're done, you're cleaning out your system, all of that leftover solution in there, the stuff that's still in your reservoir, don't throw it down the drain. You can use the leftovers to water your house plants or your outdoor plants in the summer. So don't throw it out and waste it. And it's probably not really too good for all that to go down the drain anyway. Reuse your used solution on other plants. But this is one I use. This is a liquid one. I also I haven't used this yet. So this one here is an organic one. And a lot of places don't recommend organic fertilizers for indoors because they're made from, animal products, and they can have odors and different problems like that. But I'm very organic, so I'm going to try this. This one, you add a cup of water to the packet and squish it up, and then you use that, I think like a teaspoon at a time or something, and you put that in a like a gallon and add your distilled water and use that for your solution. So this is a powdered one, and the other one was a liquid one. Of course, like I said earlier, the liquid ones are easier. There's all different brands out there. So just look for something that's specifically designed for hydroponic systems.
Okay, this question came when we were talking about the rainwater versus humidifier. And the question, he's just saying, but condensate water is loaded with heavy metals.
Is it? Yeah, I would always test my water first. I have a dehumidifier, and we just pour that water out. So like I said, test the water and make sure that it has the right pH and everything. And like I said, I don't trust my well water at all. So I just use distilled water that I buy at the store. If you have does anybody have a reverse osmosis system? That's supposed to be like the best water ever. So you can use that. I have not used the water from my dehumidifier, so good to know.
Okay. After the point you made about the fertilizer, and you showed us those two examples, this person's asking, is there a document with recommended varieties that go beyond the few that you've mentioned earlier?
For fertilizers?
I think so.
I don't know if there's any specific brands or just types of fertilizers.
No, you know what? He or she just corrected it and said plants. Is there a document with recommended varieties of plants that list even more than the ones you've mentioned?
Okay, well, you can grow, like I said, almost anything that you want, you can grow. What you have to be careful of is it getting too big. So everything I've read, every document I've read says you can grow almost anything you want. Flowers, vegetables, fruits, of course, you have to be, a little common sense. You can't grow corn. Growing corn in the cob in your house would be a little bit, I think, overwhelming. If you have a greenhouse or something, or access to a sunroom or something where you have more space, of course you can grow bigger things. So it's all going to depend on your setup, your situation. I don't have a lot of space, so I mostly, like I said, I grow lettuce, I have grown tomatoes, and I am growing strawberries. So those are the three that I wanted to focus on because those are the things that I have more experience on. But anything that's a vegetable, recommend grow something that's compact. I love eggplant. I might consider growing eggplant. So
great.
I don't know if there's an actual list out there. I'm sure that, if you go out on the web, you'll find recommendations everywhere. And some of the things I put in your handout may have more recommendations than that also.
And the last question is, will you be providing copies of the slides in this presentation?
Not the exact slides. I gave you an outline, and also this was recorded. So if you want, you can go back and look at that recording anytime. What I could send you, and I've considered doing that, is those images of the different types of the gardens. I don't know if the slides would do a lot of good because I don't have a lot of what I talked about on the slides actually. But I can, if you guys want, I can send you the different images of the types of gardens if you'd like that.
And when will the recording be available?
Well, there's a person up at, when we get done, Megan, our coordinator, sends the recording to the person who is in charge of that at Delaware State University. And after that, it's out of our hands. So we never quite know when it's going to be there. Sometimes it's there in a few days, and sometimes it takes, weeks. But we have no control of that. So I can't give you a definite time frame.
I actually have a question, Debbie.
Yeah.
You and I both get Mother Earth magazine, and there's an article just this month. It's an article written by an organic farmer who maybe naturally argues that plants grown in organic soil provide more nutrients than hydroponics. Have you ever heard that? Do you think he's just saying that because that's how he makes his living?
I think it's going to depend on your nutrient solution, because you can provide all the nutrients and you can use organic. Like I said, this one is organic. So you can do hydroponics organically. It's a little bit higher maintenance, so it's not totally recommended. But there's, I wouldn't say it's better to do that. It's probably easier because, I'm an organic gardener, and I think organic gardening is actually easier than having to go out and put a lot of different fertilizers on your property. So, because if you compost and you keep your soil healthy, you don't need as many things. In hydroponic, if you use an organic fertilizer, I don't see that it's getting anything different than it would be out in nature. But I don't know. I haven't read that article yet, but I will look for it.
Okay. Someone just added a comment that the ROI system is great. No need to buy distilled water. We used it for a saltwater aquarium.
What's ROI?
Oh, I don't know. Roy. Law. I guess they're just suggesting a system.
Okay, I don't.
Oh, reverse osmosis.
Yeah, the reverse osmosis water system. So we just had to get a new water softener because, like I said, our well water is terrible. We have sand. We have a lot of sand. So they put this filter on, whole house filter on our water softener, and it was supposed to last 6 months. And within like 3 weeks, it was full. So I don't trust my water at all. They recommended getting the reverse osmosis system. But you can only buy so much stuff at one time. Have to watch my budget, and the reverse osmosis was a little bit on the expensive side. So since we invested $4,000 in a new water softener, that wasn't in our budget right now. But I would definitely, if somebody wanted to give me one, I would take it.
All right, you're getting lots of thank yous. Very informative. Great job. Great information. So I think
let me put I still have it up here. The link to the evaluation is in there if you guys are still here. And if anybody wants to hang out a minute, I can do a little show and tell. I have some stuff here I can show you if you're interested. I know we're over time, so if you got to go, you got to go. But if you want to see some of my materials, I have a little show and tell kit here. So I showed you the fertilizers. These are grow pods that I use in my Aero garden. These are made out of cocoa coir, they claim by the manufacturer. And this is what they look like. You can see this. So it has a little hole in the top where you can put the seeds. If you have a plant with roots, you can open it up so that the roots fit. So those are what I put my seeds in to start. So those are grow pods. For a wick system, somebody sent me this for free, but this is just regular like cotton cord that you can use for a wick system. So we're actually going to, I don't know if anybody here ever came to my herb presentation where we did a do-it-yourself herb container out of a 2-liter soda bottle. So we're actually going to do a thing where we're going to make wick gardens, the same process as those soda bottles were, but we're going to use a substrate in there instead of soil. So this would be the wick. What else do I have here? The grow baskets that come with the AeroGarden have the little where am I holding this? Have the little thing on the top. And when you get a kit, like this one came with herbs. So this was thyme, which I haven't used since I have thyme growing outdoors, but it's already seeded for you. But it has a little thing on the top, which helps keep the algae from growing because it keeps the light out. And then for bigger plants, these are what we call net pots. So I'm making a system where I'm going to cut holes in the top and put these in the holes and put my plants in here with some probably some either perlite or some clay pellets, which I can also show you. So this is for a little bit larger plant. So strawberries are going to go in here. This is a 3-inch pot. You guys all know what a pump looks like. This is just a regular standard aquarium pump. This has 2 outputs, so I can use it on 2 systems at a time. For the cords that they put in there, these things usually come with clear tubing. It's really recommended that you use black tubing instead to prevent algae from growing inside the tubes. So I just wanted to mention that. The meters that I talked about. So I bought this set. So it comes with a 1 meter that will measure the TDS, the EC, and the temperature. So I can make sure that I have the right amount of nutrients in there using that. It's it's electronic. You just take the thing off here and stick it in the water, push the button, and it gives you a reading. So that if for what I'm growing, I can make sure I have the right level. And this kit also came with a pH meter. Like I said, you can use just regular pH test strips. When you get these, they have to be calibrated. So they send you a solution that you can use to set it, it's already predetermined, so you can set it at the right level so you know that it's working right. So those are my supplies. See what else do I have? Oh, and last but not least, for growing my strawberries, I bought a huge bag of clay pellets. So sorry. Yeah. I am definitely going to have to wash these first because there's probably all kinds of debris and loose parts in here. So I will rinse these thoroughly and soak them before I use these. And I'll put these in my net pots and they'll support my strawberry plants. So these are just one possible option of substrate. I like to try a lot of different things. So, I have the grow pods. This is my next adventure in hydroponic gardening. So that was all I had to show you. Oh, wait, I have one more thing. I have a little. So if you're talking about kits, this is a very basic small kit. I actually took it down because I like my other kits better. But you can get these things probably cost like $30. Very simple. It's got the tray on the top. It's got the grow light here. It's LED grow light. Inside, it comes with a pump in there. So just as you can see, I shut this down yesterday and I cleaned it. It's all nice and clean, no algae. And it's ready to go if I decide to plant something else. I know some of you guys know I have another house in Canada and I actually have an AeroGarden up there. I have to make sure I'm there long enough to get stuff, but I might take this one to Canada and bring that AeroGarden back because I like it better. So those are just some options. It didn't break, don't worry. So is there any final questions before we close out here?
Does not look like it. Oh, is your herb presentation online?
Yes, it's on the if you go to our, everybody should have that link somewhere in something that I've sent you at some time. I feel like I send it out all the time. But if you go to that, you can see all the stuff we have on the Delaware State University Master Gardener page. And over on the left, there's a menu, and there you'll see a menu that says virtual presentations, and you will see the link to all the different ones that we have that are there. They're actually on YouTube, but if you click on that, it'll take you to YouTube. If you're on YouTube and you want to search for them, you can get to them that way also. It's a little bit harder to find.
You can also Google Delaware State University Master Gardener Program and find our website.
Yeah, it's a little, if you start from the main part of the University of Delaware or Delaware State University's webpage, the main page, it's a little bit hard to find because we're under the Department of Agriculture section. So you have to navigate around to get to us.
Two people asked if you can start seeds with clay pellets.
I wouldn't recommend doing that. Clay pellets are probably best for larger plants. Like I said, I'm gonna use my strawberries. But if you start seeds in that, the seeds are likely, have a lot of airspace in between, the seeds will probably fall through. I would recommend using, if you want to start seeds, 2 recommendations. One is one of these kind of things, a little grow sponge pod. And the other one is rock wool. Rock wool is awesome for starting seeds. You can get like a sheet that comes in a bunch of little cubes, and you just separate the cubes and you can start seeds in there. And then once the seeds start growing through the bottom, then you can put them in your system. So that would probably be a recommendation. I wouldn't use the pellets to start seeds. I mean, you can try anything you want. You may make a whole new discovery. I mean, there's a lot of discoveries still being made out there, but I would think that the seeds would fall through because they're, like I said, it's like rocks. So.
Can you use clay pellets in the wicking system? Someone's asking.
Yeah, you should be able to once your plant is established. Yep.
And someone asked if you could show the wick bag again.
Sure. I mean, you can use different things. I have even used like the things that come in like oil lamps, the flat cotton things, anything that'll absorb water. You can take even like old t-shirts and cut them in strips and tie them up or braid them or whatever, make them thicker and use that. You can use pieces of burlap. A lot of the examples I've seen have used burlap strips. So anything that will pull water up into your system, it's really cool how it works, because the water just, it defies gravity, instead of falling, it actually travels upward into your plant.
Okay, cool. That is it.
Great job, Debbie. That was awesome.
Thank you.